All right, we're back again. I think we're on episode 6 or 7 now, which is great. Thanks
It's,
again for jumping
it's
on.
adding up. We're getting
It's
there.
adding up. We're being consistent.
Yeah,
And then speaking of being consistent, there's a theme that we're talking about. It's always about great creative and storytelling, and then the data behind it. Because it's great to see an ad and be like, oh, this thing's so cool. But it's all the data that has to drive decisions. So that intro is the topic that we're talking about today, which is custom metrics in the Meta Ads dashboard. So you actually understand what you're looking at.
for sure. And to kind of caveat, like North Beam, multi-touch attribution, those are all great. But there's some things when it comes down to deliverability and you're really trying to assess like impact on the fundamentals of advertising, right? Reach and frequency. You need to use the platform and there's some custom metrics that we use to help kind of get a pulse on where things are delivering, how it's functioning. But yeah, I think a lot of DR advertisers tend to get so focused on the ROAS, get so focused on the performance metrics that when you step out from a 30,000 foot view, you can kind of miss the forest through the trees, which might just be something like your year over year incremental reach is down. So we use a number of custom metrics to kind of track that and pulse that and also see what ads are driving first time incremental reach.
So before we get into the custom metrics, why is it so important to look at reach, frequency, like some of these less important metrics that people tend to forget about?
Yeah, I think the biggest key is that we're kind of entering more of a zero click consumer um, you know, environment these days where there's a lot, there's more research, there's screenshotting the ad, going to Google, opening up another app, using LLMs. So a lot of brands that are just click focused in their advertising will tend to kind of get stuck sort of in this same pool of audience because they're not paying attention to the fact that like maybe click through rates are going down, unique clicks are going down. ROAS could look good, but yeah, it's just it's an important metric to pay attention to, especially as we head into more awareness-based advertising on social apps. So Meta, TikTok, the YouTube Shorts, these are all apps that don't measure well now. I mean, Meta probably measures the best, but like they don't measure well compared to where it was, 10 years ago of being able to really hone in on identifying this click associated with this purchase. So you have to kind of drive with your fundamentals in mind of making sure you're reaching new people at a consistent rate at scale and that frequency is at a healthy benchmark.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's a lot about reach and quality these days. Even if you can't track it, you just need to look objectively at, is this a great quality creative? Is it reaching a lot of people? Is the CPM reasonable? Or is the frequency getting too high because we're just retargeting our warm pool already?
Exactly. And we've talked about it before, but like only about 20% of the users on Meta are actually in market. So that's a really low bid pool if you think about it. And there's a lot of other fish in the sea, so to say. So you want to make sure that your ads, especially if you're running high budgets, are consistently hitting those new people.
So if you're optimizing for purchases in an account and the available purchasing pool is 20% of people, then does that mean that you're just missing 80% of the market by having purchase optimization?
Yeah. So part of what Meta, you know, what they're great at is continually biting into that additional audience that isn't quite in market, but they might be in market, soon. We have a kind of a debate going back and forth with one of our Meta reps right now on the new customer custom event that only fires for new customers that we run a number of accounts with because it's really good at getting out of that same pool. However, they have a point which is over time, those campaigns are not gonna be kind of creating new demand. They're going to be really just going after new customers that are already in market, where the standard purchase event is going to kind of do two things. It's going to over time create new demand, so bring people that aren't in market into market, but also convert people that are already in market. So the way I explain it is like Meta's algorithm and in its foundation, its ad algorithm is a search and exploit algorithm, right? It invests money to go and search it also invests money to exploit. And it's sort of oscillating between these two functionalities. So keeping that in mind as you're running ads at scale, that there's going to be periods where ROAS isn't very good, but it's out there building that demand, finding those in-market people, or creating those in-market people rather. And then there's other times where, maybe you have really strong conversion rate, a lot of sales come in, ROAS is high. It's sort of reaping the fruit, so to say. So I could do a whole talk on just this alone of like, if I had a dollar for every conversation we have with clients about this, where you have a really strong few days of sales and you're pushing the budget and you're really capturing demand and you've hit a new scale on that account, a new benchmark. Well, then right after that, you might have a really poor day, or a really poor few days, and and then instantly you're like, wait, what's going on? Like, why is the account pull back, and it's like, actually, no, we just, we spent into this demand that we were seeing. And now the account, has sort of harvested all of those conversions. Well, now it's at a new baseline, and it's going out and it's finding new people. If we just ride it out, we could get that account up to that next baseline. We can let that money do its thing, because we know a lot of conversions don't come in always on the first day that user's touched with an advertisement either. So you really have to look at it over the course of 7 to 10, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on the product, depending on the AOV, that as you're investing more and scaling into demand, you're doing two things. You're reaping current demand that's already been generated, but you're also creating new demand that's going to be captured downstream in the coming weeks.
So if you have a period where performance is really strong, you get an all-time high scale in that campaign or in that account, you're probably just exhausting your reap resources, and now you have to go through the explore section and create that new demand again.
Exactly. A good example, we have a brand. Their AOV is around $1,000. They're, I guess they would be in like the home goods category. We go through these cycles where, we have a lot of sales, we scale into it, and then it gets really slow. Well, a good example is the ad account got shut down due to a false positive thing on the billing profile. The ad account got shut down for about a week, and for the entire week that the ad account was shut down, sales were extremely strong. MER was really good, obviously, because we're not spending any ads, and quote, performance is great, right? However, we get the ad account back on about a week later. We start running ads again, and the week following that is atrocious. Nobody's buying anything. The ads aren't hitting anybody. Obviously, it's re-optimizing and finding folks, but what? It's kind of like, well, what's going on? Like, did the new ad account break, or what's happening? Fast forward another week, then that demand starts trickling back in, and our MER is stabilized. Our acquisition is strong again. Things are, all the key metrics are looking healthy. And what happened there is, it's just that gap in advertising wasn't being realized till almost a week after that gap happened, because we know it's about a 7 to 10 day journey from click to sale on the ad. So
Or from discover to sale.
Discover to sale. So like, if we wouldn't have pushed through that week of really slow performance, we potentially would have just scaled back the entire business by a massive amount and had to really incrementally scale back up again. But we knew that, the ads we're running today they're not going to be, they're not going to yield results until next week or maybe 2 weeks from now. So kind of in those seasons, you just have to push through and trust the data that and your understanding of the customer journey.
Yeah, it's a good experience to go through and to figure out. Almost accidentally, the account was paused, you had a billing issue, but you got to figure out what the true customer life cycle is. And I think that's really cool. I sometimes see the same thing in software, but it's a lot more obvious, where you have a free trial period. So if we have a gangbuster sale day or a couple days that peaked really well, I'm always looking back to, okay, who posted 7 days ago? Who tagged us in a story? What email went out? It's like, you're trying to figure out what was the cause of this. But in ecom, actually in most businesses, it's not always a see it, buy it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not like I go on Amazon and I buy the product immediately. It's the journey. It's falling in love with the brand, discovering it, So there's that time that it takes for the customer to see multiple touch points, piece of content on socials, and then eventually convert.
Exactly. And knowing how different it is for different brands. One of the brands that was kind of my first big account that I got the opportunity to scale really from Kickstarter, right out of Kickstarter up to 9 figures. Um, it was a gift product, very first touch purchase. So direct response, sales driven ads worked really well. And we were realizing that revenue within the day, basically. It took me a while to kind of pivot that mindset away from that in managing apparel and managing home goods and managing, survival and prepper food. Like there's a much different customer journey there. And so the way that you manage the account, the way that you forecast, the way that you plan, and the targets that you set are completely different.
Yeah, it's different for per industry, and then it's also different based on the product and the AOV of that product.
Exactly. Yep. Product, LTV associated with it,
Like a $500
CAC
product
payback
is
cycle.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm sure that you can see that same day touch on a dollar or a product that's $19. You can see it like I see it, I buy it, that's it. But something that's higher ticket is going to take that time to make a decision.
exactly. And like with the floor costs in advertising and Meta, and even TikTok, like to be profitable on a $20 product with ads on first touch is nearly impossible nowadays.
For
It's,
sure.
you know, is kind of contrary to what we do, but what I tell a lot of brand owners, especially new brand owners that are getting started, maybe they have a product and its AOV is maybe under $40 or $30. I actually tell them to not invest in ads and go invest in organic content. Um, Double down on your content, find stuff that works, use that to hone in your offer and your messaging. It's a lot harder. It takes a lot longer. But once they figure out, then our ads can just be more like fuel to the fire. It can amplify something that's already working. But to lead it with paid ads when you don't have a content strategy that's already, you know, extremely effective, like you can't scale a brand, in my opinion, in the ways that you would in 2020 and even before that.
Yeah, well, not if you're only relying on that $40 purchase to be your only purchase. But it might be
Yeah.
okay if it's your first purchase, but your lifetime value is, $185 because you're going to upsell them on the second thing and the third thing.
Yeah, exactly. Where, if it's something like a consumable, you could do that all day long. Break even or better on first purchase, you're golden. Because you can float a $40 acquisition cost on Meta in that case. The reality is those CACs are going to be high, just the nature of the auction and the floor price, you know, in the bid pool. There's no really getting around it other than extremely good content that's viral and a great sales flow and a great offer. So, every now and then there'll be a brand that hits that product market fit, that perfect marketing, the excellent content creation, and you can come along and really get behind it. But even those brands, they have a peak of virality to it. You maximize on it, and then unless there's an LTV payback, it can, quickly turn into uh, kind of just a spike business that's goes down as fast as it goes up.
Yeah, and that's the importance of understanding the fundamentals and the data and making sure that you're tracking the right metrics. So let's pull it back because I think what we wanted to talk about is setting up custom metrics in Meta. How do you do this on some of the larger accounts, and what data are you looking at that other people just wouldn't think to set up?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple. I'm going to screen share here. We're going to anonymize the data, or at least block out the client information here post edit, but I'll screen share here and we'll walk through what that actually looks like on a large account. One thing that we look at is this custom metric called first time incremental reach, which it's essentially your impressions divided by your frequency. So that actually gives you your first time reach. So that in itself is a good metric to monitor. So like, all right, how many people are we reaching that are net new, not just like they're getting hammered again? And then what you do is you divide that by your impressions, your total impressions, and that gives you a percentage of how many of these people being reached are actually first time, which you know, it's a good metric to pulse and compare from. And really you want to look at it on a more of a granular level, like either very granular on the ad or on the account level. But monitoring this will really help you to see what's happening with those ads. Um, and then of
So I guess
course,
the layman's terms of this, just for simplicity, for understanding, if the FTIR is low, call it 20%, and the ROAS is very high, it means the ad probably can't scale past a certain threshold because it's mainly hitting a retargeting audience. Is that, am I
yeah,
understanding it correct?
yeah, that's a good way to look at it. The other thing, it will correlate with frequency, and so you'll notice on some of these ads, 30 days, there's kind of a high frequency on here, and those higher frequency ads have a lower first time impression rate. You look at this on and the longer that you zoom out, the lower this goes. So definitely, like for instance, if we look at a year to date, here, and we compare against previous year, you'll see we're floating only around a first 4%. Now this is including retargeting and everything, but when you're looking at a macro level, that's a pretty low first time incremental rate. However, it is up
Wow.
about 6% year over year, so that's good. Like we're reaching more this year. However, like that's good, but it's not good when you look in comparison to your ad spend year over year. Our ad spend's up 25%, but our first time incremental reach is only up 7%, 6.7. So that's something you want to weigh and consider. Okay, where's that gap, right? Like a lot of our ads is our frequency up year over year. So then we can go, dive in here on a macro level. Frequency is actually down a bit on a blended number. Still a pretty high frequency. Again, this is blended. So what I would recommend doing is breaking it down by your campaign cohorts too, and looking at prospecting year over year, remarketing year over year, and then finding those benchmarks for specific cohorts. So for instance, like I have benchmarks that I kind of just work off in my head on like a 7-day for prospecting. I like to see between a 1.2 to high side, like a 1 point, depending on the brand, 1.8 to 2 on a 7-day frequency in my prospecting. Generally, when I see it there, I see pretty good new customer percentage, good first time visit percentage, all the other correlating metrics that are connected to that. But this is a great custom metric we love to use just to get a pulse on that overall blended reach. Another one I like to use, I started using this during like iOS when you really had no visibility, kind of before we were using Northbeam. I call this QCP, quality click percentage, and it's just landing page views divided by link clicks. It's almost like a reverse bounce rate. It just tells you of the people that are clicking out from an ad, how many people are actually getting tagged by the pixel in a landing page view. Um, that's another one to monitor. Less effective now if you have an MTA or using Northbeam and stuff, but this is a good one. And then purchases divided by reach, which is just an overall like very soft directional conversion rate, right? Of the people we're reaching, how effective is it to get them to convert? And this again gives you an idea on the campaigns and kind of a conversion rate as it relates not to clicks, but as it relates to actually reach.
Yeah,
Um,
so I imagine that purchases divided by reach is going to be disproportionately way higher on retargeting campaigns.
exactly. And you can see here, this is a retargeting campaign where it's 15% versus this one,
Sure.
which is very new customer focused. The goal of this one is to go hunt new people.
These are so interesting. I like the quality click percentage one, and I don't know if you remember this. You and I had lunch about 3 or 4 years ago now, and you showed me that metric,
Yeah.
and it helped us pin down a loading speed issue that we had on an account that was doing about
Oh,
$25
cool.
million because they
Nice.
had a video as the homepage. And
Yeah.
especially during sale times, we're like, okay, swap out the video. It has to be a static image, especially for a sale when people are just clicking through to buy fast and not taking the time to browse. So
Totally.
these are really interesting metrics.
It's so interesting because like a lot of times the performance marketing team doesn't necessarily collaborate with the CRO team, right? But if you can identify like gaps in that checkout cycle or gaps in that, you know, essentially the click to purchase, whatever happens between that, you can really help optimize the brand because another one, right, for instance, is quality session percentage. Same thing, just add to carts divided by link clicks. So you're really getting you're getting a view of the actual funnel through the ads manager that just gives you another level of depth for optimizing campaigns because you're able to say like, all right, why is this one 36 and this one, 12%? Well, obviously this is a retargeting ad set or campaign, but it allows you to ask questions too. So, something we're looking at is we look at this a lot, but a large brand we work with just released on Amazon last month. And um, as expected, there's a certain percentage of their D2C sales that are getting cannibalized from Amazon. So we're paying to drive them to the website. They're getting there, and then they're not that conversion isn't necessarily being realized because they're tabbing over to Amazon, buying the product, getting it on Prime. Super common. I think that's a shopping pattern a lot of us have. Or we see the ad and we don't even click to the website. We just go right to Amazon and see if it's available. There's no way to really measure that, obviously, in ads manager. An MTA isn't going to pick up that data. We can run incrementality studies, which we're doing as well to kind of get a harder metric on what that cannibalization rate is. But the first place that I always go when that happens with the brand is to your cart drop off. How many people are initiating checkout and then not finalizing that final step of conversion? And what's that percentage, and has that ratio increased since you released on Amazon? On this brand specifically, we had the CRO agency look at it and they saw a big jump in cart drop-offs as soon as they launched on Amazon. So a lot of the there's a way to kind of infer through that data that there's definitely something happening that changed in the time period that correlates when the product went live on Amazon. So it's just good
So
metrics
interesting.
to lean into to understand kind of what's happening post click on these ads and something,
Seeing it
especially with other
expressed
sales
as the
channels.
sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just going to say, especially with other sales channels, if you have a big mix that's outside of Shopify, definitely want to pay attention to that metric.
Yeah, you need to take that holistic approach. Seeing it as a percentage is so interesting. Like it makes it easy for anybody to understand the gains and losses at any level. And then you just go back to what the campaign is, who it's targeting. Is it retargeting or is it prospecting? Is it a testing campaign? And then you can kind of make sense of the data by grouping it up.
Exactly. Something that kind of ties into is a key metric we look at too is a percentage of first time visits from an ad. And we'll look both in platform on the deliverability on the different audience segments, but then we'll also look through the MTA of like percentage of first time visits. Something that I think a lot of people missed in the last couple of years with Meta Shops is deliverability to the website is actually more valuable than deliverability to Meta Shops because when you drive them to your website, you're actually able to pixel them with your other ad platforms. Meaning, another brand we worked with, you know, they were one of the poster childs for Meta Shops when it launched. Massive success early out the gate, you know, scaled Meta Shops like crazy, drove a ton of new customers, but it only lasted about a year. And over time, their new customer percentage dwindled. Everything just started to downtrend, right? They're new to file. It was kind of like, what's going on? Then deliverability to shops kind of waned a little bit. And we came in, we started running manual campaigns that were going directly to the website, optimizing on a custom event because we needed to essentially drive new traffic for this brand. Because this brand was driving an extremely high cost per new visit and low new visit percentage, which told us those leading indicators it actually means they're buying a lot of impressions and traffic that's not incremental. They're stuck in that retargeting pool. Now, this brand, given their category, they have a high repeat purchase rate, which is very common for this category. But with that in mind, we knew that all right, we need to get the media dollars going and investing and attacking new people, not just harvesting everything that's there. So we deployed some different tactics, but one of those was actually removing shops as an option for the ads to deliver to, and started driving directly to the website and everything new that we did. And that had a great effect. One, it allowed us to get a higher new customer percentage, lower cost per new visit, get more incremental sales. But then the other effect that had, the kind of adjacent benefit, was that suddenly Google now has visibility on all these new people that are coming into the funnel, that they can, it helped their organic SEO, it helped Google, it helped TikTok, any of the other platforms that are pixeling that same traffic that you bought on Meta. Now, that audience is more prioritized in those platforms as well, where before they weren't. So, it I don't know. It was kind of a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, wait a minute. Like, why would we run to shops? Like, sure, maybe the conversion rate's higher on the front end because they're going to purchase right away. But like, that's a very, like, very nearsighted way of looking at it, when it's like, no, no, no. If we're buying the traffic, we want to make sure that once they're to our website, every other ad platform has the ability to rank that user higher in their audience graph, so that we get a premium, maybe, in that second, third, fourth click, wherever they are in their user journey.
That's such a cool discovery. That's so cool. And honestly, I never would have thought about that. But it makes sense. You're essentially spending ad dollars chasing your tail in the same retargeting pool that you can't get out of, and you're only acquiring purchases from one domain, like from one area, just from Meta Shop.
Yeah, and let's say that user adds to cart, but they don't purchase. No one knows that. No, meaning no other ad platform knows that. Google doesn't know that this user that searched for this brand, added it to the cart, and didn't purchase. Let's rank the ad higher in the PMax campaign for them because we know they're higher intent. Like, that data never makes it to the other ad platforms, and you miss out on, reaping the downstream investment of the millions of dollars that you spent to get in front of that user and get their click.
Right. And you don't own the customer base. You're relying solely on Meta. You're not collecting their email. You can't advertise them to them in other platforms. So I guess the simple layman's terms, because I just like to dissect it in my mind, and then for anybody listening, if you're only relying on Meta and Meta checkout, and they're not communicating any data back to your website, it means you can't tell Google, hey, this is a verified buyer. They're actually looking to buy the product. And then Google's not going to send an ad to them later, which means the only opportunity that you have to recover that purchase is in Meta Shop. They're not going to see it on TikTok. They're not going to see it on Google or on Reddit or on X or on any other platform that you're running ads on. And they're not going to get any emails from you because there's no other data. You're relying entirely on one platform, and you're just completely missing the cross-pollination opportunity that you have on all these other platforms.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that a lot of folks, there'd been discussion around, like, oh, you don't own the customer, you don't get the email, and so they might have made some updates for that. But no, it doesn't matter about that. It's owning the click ID and the pixel, because that's what goes into the rest of the ecosystem for Google to understand, like, who this user is and how intent they are. Now, since this, in the last 2 months, everybody's probably heard by now that Meta's actually sunsetting the checkout feature, so that the checkout will now happen on the website again, meaning somebody has it in cart, they're sending them to Shopify, which is a pretty amazing development in my opinion, because I might be biased, but I never really was fond of checkout on Instagram.
I think everybody was a little skeptical of it at first, and there was always the looming question of, is there going to be a transaction fee, which was probably their ultimate goal. If they could get away with it, it's a little monopolistic, but if they could, I'm sure that they would. But yeah, that's interesting. I guess they're noticing enough of a loss in ad dollars and enough upset big customers that they're just going to divert back to Shopify.
Yeah, and I think that's the right move for them, because they're a social media platform. They're an advertising business. They're not Shopify. They're not Amazon. They're not an e-commerce platform. So for them to kind of diverge and become an e-commerce platform, not only did they have to convince like sellers and advertisers that they're an e-commerce platform that's better than these other solutions, they also have to convince consumers to buy from them that they're a better solution than Amazon. And that's a very competitive objective to try to go after if you're Meta. And I think they invested a lot of resources into doing it. I don't think it was necessarily, I don't think they got the outcomes that they were expecting in the short term from that.
It feels like such an insider look. I don't know if a lot of people, certainly people that don't spend a lot of money on Meta, would not come to that realization without being told directly.
Yeah. And I think when you're in the platform on a daily basis, spending, millions and really understand the ecosystem connected with the engineers who are actually building it, that's where you get a lot of the insights on where their prioritization is. And even
And so
now,
you have a team at Meta that you speak with, right? And they like give you some of this insight.
yeah, some of it. What's interesting is the sales side isn't as informed as even some of the other media buyers or tech partners that we know. So I think, yeah, have to be careful kind of what we say and share, but they're making and it's obvious they've expressed this in their earnings calls and stuff, but they're making an obvious pivot to AI and their infrastructure in general, which is super important because that's going to make targeting actually better than pre-iOS in my opinion, because they've made all the partnerships, most of the partnerships they need to fill the data gaps that iOS has, iOS 14 like had kind of blocked, and future iOS rollouts. And then they've also done the investment in the machine learning side to make targeting more effective, kind of from both sides, from the data and also the machine learning and targeting. So my opinion is that it can get more effective and targeting can be better. The difference now between 2020 and 2025 is that, the auction is just so much more dense. There's so many more people that were investing billions into traditional linear TV advertising 5 years ago are now reallocating that money to social because that's where all the eyes are. So it's not this like, low cost pool of impressions that you can go buy because none of the big players are, you know, primarily allocated on it. Now, like social and, digital is one of the biggest category for these larger corporate advertisers. So it's not that the targeting is worse, it's that the auction is just more competitive. Even YouTube, like I don't, I'm classic cable cutter. I only watch YouTube on our TV, and like the ads that I see there, they're not these like Shopify drop shipping stores or these D2C brands. It's these corporate conglomerates that are, distributing their ad dollars across the entire planet in the billions, paying for the eyeballs. And of course, they're measuring success a lot differently than the D2C performance marketer that's, trying to sell their product on Shopify. So those advertisers are just, the competition's changed. It's not just a pool of D2C Shopify brands these days.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all coming full circle because more of these big conglomerates are spending hundreds of millions or billions of dollars getting impressions on social, which increases the auction cost, which makes it harder for the quote unquote small brands, even the $100 million brands, to compete because the auction cost is so much higher. And I guess Meta's reaction to that is we're we're not going to track performance like we did in 2018 because it's a completely different market. We're not going to look at that pre iOS 14 world. It sounds like updating the way that they attribute purchases based on 2025 consumer behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they're doing a lot to try to create a attribution model that allows you to get an accurate picture on the effectiveness of your ad dollars, but also like, you can't tell people that they're only getting, especially small advertisers, mom and shop businesses, that they're only getting a 1x return on their investment, so
Right,
you have to
right.
have view attribution. So I think they're playing a very interesting game in regards to measurement.
Yeah, well, it's just becoming more complicated. It's not as straight line advertising as it was in the heyday 2014 Facebook ad days.
Yeah.
There's a lot more layers to it. And you need to think of running your business or your advertising not as just throwing something against the wall in Meta and hoping it sticks, but thinking of it as like the whole macro view, working with different departments, your design and CRO team and your paid ads team and your social team to make sure it's cohesive branding. You're putting out consistent messaging, you have really great content. It's not just throwing up an ad anymore. It's there's a lot of structure and planning that goes into actually succeeding.
And, yeah, less dependent on the algorithm and deliverability and more dependent on the creative now.
I guess, like you said, it's kind of like TV advertising back in the day. No,
Hmm.
you're not really thinking about deliverability, especially if you go back to like 25 TV stations in the 60s.
Yeah,
It's, everybody's watching at this time. It's not a deliverability question because you're reaching everyone.
exactly.
It's just a question of like, how good is the creative? How convincing is the messaging? And it's coming down to production quality and like showing something new. And I think the same thing is happening here because if you're only relying on clicks, but consumer behavior isn't clicks, it's views, it's entertainment, it's engagement.
Yeah,
And that's how it needs to be measured.
exactly. Yeah, it requires a lot more depth of understanding of marketing and brand and psychology.
Every time we talk, I learn something new. These are such interesting conversations.
It's good to catch up. I appreciate it. Love getting
Yeah.
to getting
Yeah,
to talk shop
likewise.
with you.
Totally. Well, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch up again next week.
Absolutely. Sounds good. You have a great one.
You too.
See
Thanks,
ya.
everyone.